6 weeks after completing that deal, at that course, sorry, I'd bought my first company. It kind of lit the entrepreneurial spark in me, if you like, because I was getting an opportunity now to go and solve other people's problems. And we had an account in there that had £2 million, just under £2 million in it. And we didn't necessarily know who that came from. When is the right time to sell a business? It's now. What's the saying? If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I was always trying to make sure I've got smarter people around me because I can't know everything.
Climbing up, there's a struggle, tension in the air. But the underdog prevails, we here to declare. To the top or the mountain where champions stand. Failures can't break us, we taking command. Yeah, it's a journey, climb to the peak. Scaling businesses, who it ain't for the weak. Growth is the game, we play it real tall. From the bottom to the summit, we rise, never fall. Interview the legends, success stories told. Risepreneurs, hearts made of gold. Strategies unfold, in the struggle grace. Hardship and challenges, yeah, we still embrace.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Risepreneur Podcast, a show dedicated to all the entrepreneurs and business owners out there who's looking to grow, scale their businesses, and ultimately exit at the highest valuation. Today, we have a guest. His name is Steve Rooms. He's a serial entrepreneur, investor, also an accountant with a lot of merger and acquisition experience. He's an expert in that. He's also a founder and director of Proffix, which helps clients to grow, acquire, merge, exit their businesses. They've done it already with close to 200 companies now. Steve himself acquired 7 businesses and actually sold one of them. And we're going to touch on a lot of the points, different aspect of the business and the cycle. Steve, say hi.
Good afternoon or good evening. Baruch, it's really nice to be on your podcast.
Awesome. Perfect. Can we, as always, go how you started? You started in the corporate world. Can you bring us into that mind? Were you always entrepreneurial and went to corporate world, or something happened while you were in the corporate world and that attracted you to start your own businesses?
Yeah, so back during corporate life, I was part of a PLC. And what I became is a troubleshooter for the group, where I would go in and whatever the particular issue was in a business, I would go into that business and help them to solve it because I loved to be able to solve problems. And that was kind of the start of me wanting to go and branch out further. Now, as part of that role, I was also part of a mergers and acquisitions team. So the business was acquiring businesses in France, Germany, Sweden, also in Morocco. That allowed me to travel, experience different cultures, different ways of doing business. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I was very conscious that I was quite a small part of a larger mergers and acquisitions team. So it's something that I always wanted to go back into. But I also had these ambitions that by the time I was into my late 30s, that I wanted to set up and run a business for myself. So I set up Proffix back in 2009. And we originally set up to provide accounting services and financial consulting services, helping businesses to set up the reporting with any particular issues that they might have within the business. And that's been running ever since. And we provide more and more business advisory services now, which I know we'll touch on in a few minutes. Once we got to the start of COVID, all of the consulting work stopped. People couldn't justify the expense, or there was a lot of unknowns. So at that time, I took the decision to go back into mergers and acquisitions. But what I wanted to do is go and learn from the people who had been there and done it and had the down the stripes, if you like. I did a lot of research and found 2 people in particular who could help me to understand the full aspects of mergers and acquisitions. I took one mini course which taught me all about leverage buyouts. I did that one first. Shortly afterwards, I actually did another course which taught me 15 different ways to structure deals. And 6 weeks after completing that course, I'd bought my first company. Now, at that time, I couldn't go out and meet face to face. It was very much like we are today on Zoom calls or telephone calls. So the first thing I did after the course was found all of the local accountants and solicitors, and I started to call them, or I booked some time into their diaries to go onto a call like this. And the second firm of accountants who I spoke with, I explained what we call a buy box is, I've always looked for companies that are at least 10 years old, that have a minimum turnover of £1 million, ideally with a management team and within certain sectors. There are certain sectors that I'm not so keen on. So I'm not so keen on retail, not so keen on restaurants. There's a few others that I wouldn't be so keen on. So I explained this to the firm of accountants who I spoke to. And they said, actually, we've got 6 of our clients are looking to sell. We can discount 4 of them because they're either too small or they're just not in sectors that, as you've explained, not in sectors that you'd have any appetite in. Long story short, we bought one of them. The second deal, we got to heads of terms to the stage where we'd agreed a deal. But unfortunately, a member of his family was taken ill. And that deal, we didn't take any further. But the first business was in domestic appliance repair, believe it or not. So we took that business through COVID. We kept it running. It was in a semi-distressed state at that stage and continued to run it. Since then, we've gone on to look at other deals, particularly in the accounting sector, because that's my background. I'm a qualified accountant, and it made sense for me to look at deals in that sector. So the latest deal, or the last deal that we did in the accounting sector was just over a year ago, 15 months ago. And what we tend to look at are businesses that are a minimum of $1 million, typically $1 million, where the owners are looking to retire or at least exit and go on to other things. So this particular company, it was just short of £1 million. But one of the key things when buying businesses is to build rapport. So I try and go the extra mile to find out as much as I can about the existing owners, not just about the business, but about the owners as well. And we found out through our discussions that actually both played football to a high standard. And unbeknown to us, even though we were in different parts of the country, we'd actually played against each other. So it just helped to build the rapport between us. The discussion went very well. He wanted to retire just so he could spend more time with his family. And what we found, and I found this with a lot of accounting businesses with owners who are getting close to retirement, is that accountants are not the best at marketing. And the older business owners that haven't necessarily invested in new technology. And many accountants will say that we're accountants and business advisors, but they don't actually provide many advisory services. So over a period of time within Proffix, we looked at various software applications that would help us to streamline businesses, run them more efficiently, and give us more time in order to be able to dedicate to the clients. So we put together a program where initially we would look to update all of the technology in the business. We would have somebody who would go into the business and help us with social media presence, look at the website, and just look at the way that we were attracting new clients to the company. Once we'd got that in place, what we then do is start to introduce business advisory services. Because to me, the way that I see this, and I know there are many accountants that share this view, it's all very well telling a business owner what they've done yesterday, but that's not as important as helping them to get from £1 million in turnover to £3 million in turnover over the next 3 years. That's where you start to add real value. And that's where we start to introduce the business advisory services, where we've got growth services, we've got accountability, we've got preparation for sale. That's another one. So because with any one business that we look at, typically there are 5 to 10% of the client base looking to exit in one way or another over the next 5 years. So providing those business advisory services makes a lot of sense because we can continue to support the clients all the way through to exit now. So over time, the key thing was to make sure that we had a solid business with the right systems and processes. We then looked at client acquisition. We also reviewed the clients, and we would always go through and grade each one of the clients. So we'd sit down with all of the client managers and we'd grade them A, B, C. There's a term that we used, which was pitter, and it was pain in the backside, but it's all pain in the arse, if you like, where we would actually look at, well, how late are they providing us with information? What gross margin or what margins do we earn on this business? How much time do we have to spend on them? How quickly do they pay? So we looked at a set of criteria and we graded those clients. And in the last business that we bought, there were 42 that didn't meet the required standard for us. So the next obvious thing was to say, well, we're going to now move those clients on professionally. And the first response from the staff was, but our turnover will drop. I said, short term, yes, it will. But the idea is now we've got our marketing right, we can start to introduce or bring into the business clients that are graded A or B. And now we've got a client that's generating £2,000, £3,000, £4,000 worth of revenue for us, as opposed to one of our poorer clients, which might generate £500, £600. So we go through that process and we go through it methodically. We don't try to introduce everything too soon. We don't want to overwhelm the staff and the team. So once we've got certain milestones hit, then we'll start to introduce the business advisory services. So far that's worked quite well for us.
Awesome. Let's unpack this. Let's go back to the beginning where you said that initially you were engaged to go and solve things while at corporate. And then after that, you were exposed to merger and acquisitions. Majority of accountants, right? We perceive them as introverts, focusing on numbers, not necessarily go out there and solve things within business. It's more of a, let me look at the data and provide you with reporting, show you where you're holding. So what was it that you had expressed that you gave an idea to your leadership to engage you to go out there and solve things?
It wasn't so much selling things. I was part of a team of people and I became a troubleshooter. It wasn't so much that I had to sell anything, that because we had a group of 6 or 7 companies within the group.
Mm-hmm.
Wherever the issue was, I would go in there and look to fix it. And that was something that really, it kind of lit the entrepreneurial spark in me, if you like, because I was getting an opportunity now to go and solve other people's problems. And then once we'd fixed one particular problem, we'd be going on to somewhere else, and then there'd be something else. So that I found that fascinating.
So it was not just financial, it could be something in marketing, in the sales and operations.
It could be operational, definitely. Not so much the marketing side, because we had people who looked after that for us, but certainly on the financial, on the operational side, that's certainly what we were involved in. To give an example, there was a company in the southwest of England where they'd introduced a new IT system, but the training hadn't gone particularly well. So a lot of the team were trying to go back to use the new system in the old way. And there was data was missing. We had a lot of outstanding debts, which just needed the cash allocating to it. So it was quite chaotic. I went in there to help them to solve that. And we had an account in there that had £2 million, just under £2 million in it. And we didn't necessarily know who that came from. So we had to do quite a bit of investigative work. This is a few years ago. This is more than 20 years ago now. But we spent a lot of time getting that right, and then spending time with a team to help them to understand how they could get the most out of that new IT system.
Yeah. And that's also could be a common issue where a company leadership provides a new process and they're looking for the team to adopt, and adoption is not happening. Or if it happened, it's partially happened, and because it doesn't stick, ultimately people just drop it, right? So you come in and found a way to solve it in a way where the adoption did happen and everybody's leveraging it to its maximum potential.
Absolutely. And any time that with a new business, if we need to introduce new systems, then we bring them on board from day one. So we'll have, if you like, a beauty parade of different accounting solutions, or whatever that solution is that we're looking at. We will introduce the staff to it at the early stages, so they will see the demonstrations, they can ask the questions, they're part of the decision. And we find that introduced by having them as part of the potential solution, they engage better and they're more open to think, actually, we could use this and we can try this, and that will help us to do this with our clients. Then they become fully engaged in that process, and it helps tremendously.
I also see how you're following the path of numbers, financials. It demands from you to be detail-oriented. And now going out there, try to solve things, you would engage your critical, creative thinking that kind of produce that entrepreneurial spirit to go and solve things. And that's where kind of I see how that kind of properly positioned you to successfully start and move forward with your other ventures that came afterwards.
Absolutely. And I think another key point there is, as an accountant, you need to be able to understand your audience. So I could produce a set of accounts for people and it's a page of numbers, but it may not mean an awful lot to somebody who's just not financially minded. So we've got to think about the way that we present that information in a different way that makes it easier for the recipient to understand what the key message is. And I think you can apply that to running a business as long as if you've got the end user in mind, whether it's be your team or your clients, always keep that first and foremost in your mind. So then you're thinking about how you can get the best experience and result for them.
Yeah. And for sure, the numbers help, right? The decision-making
Yes.
process, when you look at the numbers, it's completely different than just on someone's emotional opinion, because they could
Absolutely.
be too close. I even have like recently an example of one of the partners that I had shared with me that he always thought that one individual was a peak performer, but once they started to put the numbers on the dashboards and trackers, they realized that the peak performer was actually somebody else, and they were pushing business towards somebody who's not really a peak performer because it was just based on opinion. Yeah, awesome. And again, this is not unusual. I also see in my relationships, a lot of entrepreneurs started in the accounting financial space, that they leverage that knowledge and experience to operate successful businesses. It's amazing how much it helps. So why I'm sharing this, basically to bring to everyone's awareness, whoever's listening, the importance of understanding your financials, looking at the financials and dive in deeper. And we'll touch on this why shortly. So, Steve, can I go now to the next place where you got so good and confident that you decided, okay, it's time for me to do something for myself, and you went and acquired one, right? You shared with us how you started your deal flow, how you started to communicate. Can you share some of the misconceptions, ideas that someone had at the time acquiring? Like, I'll give you from my perspective one example. When I was looking to buy my own, pretty much every company that I looked at didn't have financials straight. The brokers were introducing the information that was completely different from the real picture. Once you get the details of financial, the numbers do not match, and you don't even know how can you possibly trust and proceed forward. So what some of the things you discovered at the time when you did your deal flow that kind of shocked you in some way?
I think business brokers is one area. I think there are certain business brokers in the UK who I would never want to do business with. Sadly, what happens is when somebody makes the decision to sell a business, it's often the only time in their lives that they will ever do it. So they need somebody, understandably, to stand by their side and help them through the process. And we have business brokers who, for many, that's who they want to approach. But business brokers will often overinflate the price simply because that their fees are based on that price. So straight away, the business owner will have a false impression of how much money they're actually going to get and what a deal structure might look like for them. They might think, well, I'm going to get £1 million. I'll get it all paid on day one, and I can go and buy a yacht, or I can go and do this, and I can do whatever I want to. But sadly, that's not necessarily the case. It's quite often when we speak with business brokers that the typical valuation is a multiple of EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. And typically brokers start at 5x. Whereas if you look at the average multiples in the United States and the United Kingdom, depending on the sector, it's often significantly less than that. So you've got a business owner who will have the wrong expectation of what their business will sell for. And often they'll get frustrated simply because they're sold on a deal, and then because the price is so high, nobody ever rings their phone. Nobody ever contacts them to say, actually, I really like what you're doing. Can we have a discussion? So after the initial 1 year period that brokers typically tie you into, they're so frustrated because they've had maybe one call, maybe not any calls. And all they want to do is have a conversation with somebody who wants to buy a business they've spent many, many years building up. They just want to find the right person. But the broker can often, sadly, get in the way of that.
In my experience, I see the same. And also stats confirm that too, right? 4 out of 5 businesses never sold. And at least half failed during due diligence because of the inflation of numbers, because of how it's presented to the potential buyers.
And something else that you just touched on as well, brokers, quite often the brokers will produce an information memorandum, which, as you know, is quite a short document, which gives a high-level view of the business. And when we look at those numbers, one, they've been adjusted for, the EBITDA has been adjusted for various things that we need to scrutinize, and that's okay. But quite often, those numbers are out of date or just plain wrong. So then you have to really rely on, in the UK, we're quite lucky because we've got Companies House. So we can go to Companies House and to the accountants, to the business owner's accountants and say, can we have the statutory accounts, which include the detailed profit and loss accounts? So we're quite lucky in that respect that if I don't believe what the business broker's information is telling me, I know I can get it from a more reliable source.
Interesting. We don't have that here. So we would have to extract that from a business owner who is usually clueless about their finances. Maybe they'll provide you some P&Ls, but balance sheets, cash flow statements almost never exist. And even if they do, it's not accurate.
Yeah.
The assets, liabilities, it's just all over the place and mingling personal with other stuff. Yeah. So this, yeah.
Yeah, we've seen that many times.
Yeah. So let's go then into the place where you chose to do acquisition and you clearly defined your acquisition criteria. You wanted to stick with something that you understand, accounting world,
Yeah.
right? So you were clear about on how the age, the size, preferably to have a management level already in place, to all this to diminish the risk level because you did not really have your team in place yet, right? So that's your starting point. You wanted to have all this already in place. The reason I'm bringing this as an example is because I want to focus a little on growing through acquisitions, right? So let's say somebody already has a business. They might not have a management level yet, or they need to prepare themselves and kind of plan out, do I want to build the back office to put the infrastructure before I acquire? Or in your case, you wanted to start with acquiring something that already had management level in place.
Yeah, and it's a key thing as well, because what we don't want to do is buy ourselves a job, which is why I look for businesses of a certain size, because there's a greater likelihood that an existing management team's in place. And the reason why that's so appealing to us is because they understand the business. You know, I may understand the sector, but not necessarily the ins and outs of the business. Now, over time, I will understand it. But if I've got people, talented people already in the business that can run the day-to-day, then that's a big tick in the box for us.
So when you did that with the first one, and my assumption you had all those criteria met before you went forward and bought it, with your next acquisitions, did you roll everything into your one brand? Or you let each business continue running under their own brand and you maybe leverage your back office for all of them, or you kept all of those separate? How did you deal with the rest of the acquisitions?
Well, the key thing with those is that the business name stays the same. If I was to mention a particular well-known company, people would say, oh, yeah, I understand. Those are the accountants in this particular city. But if I was to say that that's Steve Rooms Limited, they'd be like, never heard of them. So it makes no sense for us to go in and change the names of the businesses. So each one of them runs independently. Now, we can support each one of those businesses with marketing activities, and there may be some back office functions that we can provide. An example of that is as we acquire new businesses, well, I've got a team of 3 who can, if you like, parachute in to the new company. One is One is an interim practice manager who looks after the day-to-day. The second person looks after the marketing. And the third person looks after all of the IT systems. And so what they will do is see what we've got, see where the gaps are, see what we need to do around the marketing, and see what we need to do in terms of system implementation. And they will spend some time in that business working with the local management team to make sure it fits with the systems and processes that we operate. So everybody, the theory is that everybody then operates on the same systems so that we can then share knowledge. So if we've got 4 or 5 businesses in the same group, and our target is to own between 6 and 10 UK-based accountancy businesses, then everybody's working in the same way. We can share expertise, and we find that works very well. And what it will also mean is if there's anybody within the existing team that has aspirations of rising to management level, if there's not an opportunity in the business they're currently in, there may be an opportunity in one of our other businesses.
But did you keep all the back ends, or you roll them all into one back office to use the same back end?
No, we've got a structure. So we've got a holding company, which we have a small team in there that help us with the day to day, and then we've got people we've handpicked from each one of the businesses that we own to do that parachuting in and setting everything up how we want it. So we keep each one of those businesses in its own identity. Now we've got a vertical in accountancy. We're just about to start a vertical in the leisure sector. Well, that's the business that we're looking to complete on next week. And we've got potential joint ventures in recruitment and possibly one in precious metals, but that's very early stages. Now, the way that we structure that is that underneath the holding company, we've got what we call a special purpose vehicle. And the special purpose vehicle owns all of the companies in that particular vertical, whether it be accountancy, leisure, precious metals, or anything else that we decide to invest in. So that's the way that we structure it.
Interesting. So you would have multiple SPVs.
Yeah, and I think where I'm fortunate because of my background in accountancy, because I've worked with clients in various sectors throughout corporate life and now doing what I do with Proffix, it doesn't faze me so much going into a new sector. So I'm often approached now for joint venture opportunities because people recognize that they've got a particular set of skills, whether it be operational, marketing, or whatever that happens to be, but they don't have the numbers side of things. So that combination, they have skills that I don't have and vice versa. That's what resulted in the opportunities within recruitment, precious metals, and leisure.
I like how you very intentional with your acquisitions and how later on, by having the back office processes in place, you would dive in and see how you can provide additional services to upsell and grow business by just offering those additional services without going looking for a new business.
Absolutely.
Like you would
And I think-
leverage your existing customers for that.
Absolutely. And I think is it Stephen Covey once said, start with the end in mind. So we just had to plan this out. Now, along the way, some things will go really well and sometimes it won't go so well. But at least it gives us an opportunity to learn from what hasn't and maybe just adjust our approach slightly.
I want to touch on that, start with the end in mind, right? A lot of us entrepreneurs, we get an idea, we see how we can solve something, we're able to sell it, and we'll start to grow, but not necessarily entertain the end in mind because the strategy completely changes, right? At some
Yes.
point, I wanted to build a national company, and it was just an idea without looking really at numbers. I was looking at for inspiration, some of the companies, how fast they grew and what they did. And I wanted to adopt that. But then when I replayed that in my mind and what I needed and what did I want to see at the time of the exit, the whole strategy completely changed. Apparently, I didn't have to be national to reach my goal. All I had to reach a specific profit level and exit at the number that I wanted, which I would then leverage to buy and create the passive income stream for that, right? So when we do not have the right intention about the exit, we grow, we might experience growth, but it's never intentional and it's never at the fast pace because once you have a goal and it requires you to move much quicker, make decisions quicker, especially like if you decide to go through acquisitions and you decided that you need to have this many acquisitions per year in order for you to hit that mark,
Yep.
everything changes. The people, resources, processes in place, like everything changes with that. So I like how you were intentional and got yourself, again, your previous experience probably comes and helped you with that because it's common sense, but it's not common practice. What I'm trying to say, most people do not really look at the end.
Yeah, and unfortunately, we see this with deal makers that we subsequently help because they have an idea. Well, I'll go and buy a company. I want to get involved in mergers and acquisitions. And then they buy one. And then they think, now what do I do? They haven't really thought the whole process through. They just think that once I buy a business, I'll be able to not work as many hours. Everybody will do the work for me. Great, I can start playing more golf. And unfortunately, it just doesn't work like that. You know, that you have to have a strategy in place before you even start. Sadly, I've seen many examples now where people they've got this idea of the shiny silver penny or the shiny metal object. They think that's the next best thing. So they go after it because all they see is money. Whereas actually, if they sat down and figure out why do I want to do that and have a definitive purpose for doing that, then they will be more successful.
Yeah, exactly. Another thing comes to mind that, again, based on stats, over 70% of businesses that were sold, the owners post exit regret it in the first year. That just right there shows you that people did not really think of end in mind and did not prepare themselves to exit properly where they would not have regrets of selling. For whatever reason, right? The way the transition happened, the way with what they left, how much tax they had to pay, and not knowing what to do post exit. 6 months later, you don't know what to do yourself in front of TV,
Well,
especially
yeah,
with baby
absolutely.
boomers.
Yeah. And it's, again, we try, and anybody who we work with, if we're having discussions to buy particular business, we will always try and coach the sellers, because we want a deal that works for everybody. It's not about me getting what I want. It's about everybody's got to feel like they've got something out of that deal. So we will make sure that they understand the tax side of things. We'll make sure they understand how deal structures work, and all the way through the process, we'll explain that fully so that they're not caught out. As we mentioned earlier on in the call, quite often this is the only time in their lives that people will sell a business. And for many, they think that it's like selling a house. I'll put a for sale board outside and I'll sell it, and that's it. It'll be easy. And it's not. Would I pay more for a business that's been well prepared? Absolutely. Because I've got a business that will just run. On the flip side of that, quite happy to buy a business where it needs a lot of work, but by the same token, I'm not prepared to pay as much for it because we need to put the work in. We're happy to put the work in, but we're not prepared to pay a premium for that business.
Got it. Can we show everybody and walk through something that already happened with you where you acquired and actually exited? So you shared with us how you defined your acquisition criteria. What did you want to have in place, right? So management level, the age, motivated seller, somebody who's retiring, and so on. So you got that business. Once you got it, you also shared that you would look at marketing because in your specific niche, they're not so into it. And even other niches where baby boomers involved, they're not necessarily technology savvy, right? So there's a lot of opportunities to streamline things by introducing technology and expanding on marketing. Then you also talked about how you defined the ABC clients, and
Yes.
you double down on what was really working, and you leverage your existing relationships already to introduce and upsell something. So what are the things that you did to scale the business? What are some high level challenges you faced, and what did you have to have a sale ready business that would be attractive to the buyer, and so to get your successful acquisition,
Yeah,
the
I think
selling of the company?
I think one of the key things were the existing team on one particular accounting business that we acquired. It was the misconception about what a good client looked like. The mindset was anybody who walked through the door will take them on as a client. So there was no pre-screening of clients. So we had to then, first and foremost, we had to decide, what does our ideal client look like? How big are they? What sector are they involved in? What sort of personality has the owner's got? Quite often, you may sit down in front of a client and not build that rapport. If you haven't started on the right foot, they could become a bad client. So we try to pre-screen. We'll almost interview the clients before we agree to take them on. We had to look at that process first and foremost to ensure that we're only bringing on the clients who are right for us. When we looked at the marketing side, we needed to again change the mindset from anybody who walks through the door to looking at, well, how do we leverage social media? What do we do with the existing website? What does our sales process look like? So we designed a sales process that we have a piece of software which is gaining popularity now called Score App, which is scorecard marketing.
Score app?
Score App, yep, ScoreApp.com.
I think I use them. They basically, you create like a questionnaire and they provide you a score based on different areas that you
That's
look at.
it.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the beauty of it is it creates a dynamic report. So depending on how that person has answered those questions, we can see how they've answered and how quickly they answer. So before we've even started a conversation with them, we can see where their pain points are. So we can focus our conversation on those pain points straight away, rather than going through an initial call where we're introducing each other and we've already got to know them a little bit through the scorecard. So we will then go through that call and we will look at what are their aspirations, not necessarily what are the service, and just say, we think you need this, this, and this. We will find out about them, the business, and their aspirations. And once we understand what that is, then we can start to identify, well, based on what you've told us, this is what we think you need now. But there are 3 or 4 different services that may become useful as we help you to grow. So we'll put that to one side, but then during an annual review, we will go through those additional potential services and think, actually, are we now at the stage where that could be useful? If not, fine, park it for now. Let's review it again in the near future. So we go through that process of really understanding who our ideal clients are. And once we know who our ideal clients are, then we can be more focused and targeted in the way that we market to them. Because we will know, if, for example, we were targeting engineering companies, we will understand what the pain points are of people in the engineering sector. And then we will put social media posts out there. We may do webinars. We may do live events where we will target the pain points of those owners and help them. We'll give the free information. We'll help them to understand how they might get out of a particular pain point that they've got. If we want them to feel like they're talking to me, they understand me, I want to have a conversation with them. So we always try and position ourselves as somebody who wants to help.
So it's not offer everything to everybody. You would narrow down on a specific vertical and narrow down on specific pain points and
Yes.
communicate on that level. And because they can connect with you, they're much more motivated and it's much easier to go through the sales funnel with those.
Yeah, if we put a general message out, whether it be LinkedIn or in YouTube, a lot of people, it will just pass them by because they don't see that it's relevant to them. But if
Yeah.
you put a post out that's specifically for a particular sector, then it may just think, actually, I want to see this because I need to understand this in my business.
And you're not just another accountant.
Yeah, we'll try not to be.
Yeah, exactly. It separates you. Yeah. All right. You get that dialed in, right? So your sales, the funnel, all that works. What's next?
We'll also look at the systems. Quite often in the businesses, they're very well, with the business owners who we speak to are coming up to retirement, they're very well run. The documentation is all in place. But the problem is it's all manual. To give it, again, an example of a business that we bought, I was sat in the office of the seller and he said, would you like to see a client file? So I said, love to. And there was a screen on the wall. So I looked at the screen thinking he would be logging in to show me the client files. But instead he brought out 2 huge lever arch files and said, there they are.
Oh,
This is one particular client. And again, it was very diligently done. You couldn't fault it. But I said, why isn't all of this information sat in there? I said, if I was 10 years younger, it would be. But I'm just at that stage now where we know what we do it well, and it just needs somebody with a new energy and a fresh impetus to come into this business, and they can make those changes.
yeah, which opens up so many opportunities there, right? That the creating marketing campaigns, offering
Yes.
other services, keeping in touch with them through some kind of CRM. It
Yeah,
becomes a
and
possibility, not when it's in a physical file somewhere.
absolutely. And it's quite rare to find, or certainly rare amongst the accounting business owners that I've spoken to, for them to even have a CRM. One of the key things in accountancy is that you would hope that most of your clients are on monthly direct debits, regular monthly payments. And in one particular business, they had 68% of their clients were paying that way, which was a really good start. We wanted it to be in the high 90s. It's very rare that you get 100% of your clients do that, but we had something to strive for. So I asked the question, how do we monitor all of those regular monthly payments? He said, we need to speak to this particular person in the business. They will take you through what they do. And they were physically printing off a bank statement, and they were going down the bank statement until they found a particular client payment, and then going into a spreadsheet and typing the date of the payment and the amount into a spreadsheet.
Wow.
The obvious question was, how long does this take? It could be 3 to 4 hours most Mondays. Also, we've got something called Go Cardless, and there are other systems, Stripe and other solutions. Why are you not using those? They didn't know what they were. They'd never heard of them. That, again, was quite a quick win. It took some time to migrate all the clients across, but once they'd done it, then now instead of it taking 3 to 4 hours every Monday, it was 5 minutes, because you would be sent an email that said this particular client or these clients haven't paid. And then it'd be an email or a phone call to resolve it. So that then freed this particular person up to do something that was fee earning rather than something that was more administrative.
Yeah. And cutting down on those expenses, it's pure profit to the bottom line.
It is, yeah.
So you would discover this at the time of due diligence. You did those type of opportunities, low-hanging fruits to cut down on this expense, cut down on that. Probably would
Yeah, I think a lot of the time we actually identify it because we've been through the process many times. We know what to ask. We know where the opportunities may be. So we will make sure that we ask those questions to identify, is it something that, do they have a practice management solution? Which one are they using? How well are they using it? Direct debits. It could be on the marketing side, we understand that. A CRM. Have you got a CRM? How often are you putting a mail shot out to your client? So we've got a whole range of questions now that we've built up over time that we make sure we ask all of those questions before we actually get to due diligence. Yeah. So by the time we get to due diligence, hopefully we don't get many nasty surprises. There's always something somewhere will crop up, but generally speaking, it makes that due diligence process a little smoother because what we see isn't what we didn't expect.
Got it. So after optimizing some processes and cutting down on costs there, introducing automation, semi-automation, and so on, what's next?
Then we start to look at the business advisory services. Once we're happy with systems and processes and the marketing, we know that we've got a consistent supply of leads so we can pre-qualify and go through that process. Then we start to look at business advisory. And I wish I had £1 for every time that a business owner said to me, my clients wouldn't take business advisory services. And then we start to have the conversations with those clients and say, what? I didn't know you did that. I'd love that. You know, I'd love management accounts. I'd love some support to help me to grow. Yeah. I'm actually thinking of selling, and I really would like some help because I don't know where to start. Can you take us all the way through that sale process? Yes, we can. And sometimes in the last business that we bought, I asked the question, how do you help your clients prepare for sale? And the answer was, we don't. We just pass them on to a business broker.
Wow.
So, and that's a shame because the relationship was with them. And they were passing all of that on to somebody else who didn't understand the business.
And who not necessarily will produce what you could produce through your business advisory, right? So it's not only for your benefit of potentially partnering or maybe acquiring them or something else. To me, like in my mind, to pass that business to a business broker without actually preparing them for that, you just basically shooting them down not to ever succeed. Because again, what are the chances that business broker will do their part? Because to them, it's just, let me put together the SIM and see if I have potential buyers that I can introduce it to.
Yeah, I think with a business broker, it's a transaction. When it's one of your clients, it's personal because you've always wanted for them to succeed. You've always wanted to grow and be, and be as successful as possible. So that's the way I see it. Yeah, if you wanted to be something that's just transactional, business broker will be really hands off and just get on with it.
Also, I think you have the edge here in addition to get the business advisory from somebody who's doing it for others is one thing, but to getting it from somebody who does it for others and also for themselves, you're basically walking the talk. You're doing that with your own business where you go and do the deal flow, you acquire, you do the due diligence, you see who's sell ready or not. By acquiring them, you're improving them and actually going to sell yourself. So you already know what's being involved in your own business.
Absolutely.
It's for sure a huge edge here. So what made you decide that one of your businesses was ready for sale and actually go through the sales process?
Well, it was the staff actually expressed an interest in buying it. They hadn't realized that the existing owner was looking to sell. So we'd actually gone through the process of improving some of the systems and processes. Excuse me. And two of the more senior accountants then approached me and said, would you ever consider selling to us? And one question is, when is the right time to sell a business? It's now. So I said, what does that look like for you? How are you going to structure it? And we sat down and had the discussions as I had with the buyer, with the seller at that time. and we agreed a deal and we sold the business on to the staff. We'd done quite a bit of work. There was still some more work to do with this particular example, but they were well placed to be able to do that work, and they knew what the blueprint was. And we still talk now. So if any time they need some support, or if they get a bit stuck on something, they know that I'm only a phone call away. So I've got a good relationship.
Also here, what I'm thinking of how important it is, even at the time when even if you prepared your business to sell, it's important to know, again, the end in mind. Who would be the buyer? What are they
Yes.
going to see, right? Like, are you going to sell it to one of your employees? Are you going to sell it to private equity? Is it a strategic buyer? Like, who are you going to sell it to? So based on that, your whole strategy might also change, right? And you would package everything in such a way that the other party would be more open, and that it would be more friendly towards what is being introduced to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can look at the size of the business, and if it's a smaller business, then straight away it may discount private equity. But what it might open itself up to is possibly in the UK we've got employee ownership trusts, so it may lend itself to that structure. If we can't see any succession from within, so because of what we do within mergers and acquisitions, or what I do in mergers and acquisitions, I'm part of a wider network. So we can help them to make sure the business is prepared as well as possible. So we can make sure all the financials are in place, systems and processes are documented. We can set up the data room, information memorandum. We can basically prepare almost the phrase, what was the phrase? A business in a box. We can almost make it like a business in a box.
Mhm.
And then we can put that out to my network and produce a beauty parade. So we may get an expression of interest from a number of different people, and we'll take 6 or 7 potentially interested buyers, and we will narrow that down and then put 3 of them in front of the seller. And if the discussions go well, obviously we're going to help them all the way through that sale process. And if we find that none of those 3 are appropriate, or the rapport's not as good as what they would have liked it to have been, then we can go back out and look at other opportunities or other potential buyers for them.
I want to bring everybody's attention to what was just shared. Business in a box, right? That positions you to have multiple buyers, maybe even compete between each other to try to acquire it, so you can go to the highest bidder, versus
Yes.
just going randomly to at some decided time, I want to exit, and now you maybe gonna get a phone call. Maybe
Yes,
you will
that's it.
sell. It's like what a difference it is, right? And having your own network of potential buyers also, it's such a huge benefit. Interesting. Can we touch on one last thing? Maybe again, high level, not necessarily. I know everything depends on the business, the size, and the desires of the seller, and so on. Is there ways to, or the type of structures one should go look at and explore on a deeper level, or contact you, because you're coming again from the accounting side, on positioning things where they would leverage a maximum to bring on, like cut down on a certain expense like tax, business broker? And so is there a way to position a deal where if you position it this way, you might get maximum tax benefit? Is there like, I'm not sure if I'm asking the question correctly. I'm trying to figure out, like, is there a way to structure it where you would maybe not exit right away? Maybe you will hang around a little bit and structure it in
Yep.
such a way that you will not have to go crazy on the capital gains and
Yeah, I
other
think
fees.
again, in the UK, we've got something called business asset disposal relief, which used to be called entrepreneurs relief. So on the first £1 million of every sale, of any sale, you can pay only 10%. If the business was to sell for £2 million and there were 2 owners, they could each get the full benefit of the minimum amount of tax. Now, in the other ways we can minimize, quite often legal fees can be quite expensive. So we have a suite of legal documents which we can initially prepare, whether it be heads of terms, consultancy agreements, sale and purchase agreements. So we've got a suite of those documents which we've used in our own deals, which enables us to be able to initially prepare it, and then at the appropriate time, then bring in a legal representative. And that enables us to keep those costs down. And when we do work with our legal teams, it's on a fixed fee basis. And the reason why we work on a fixed fee basis is it tends to focus a solicitor's mind or an attorney's mind. Whereas you'd be surprised how many times, if they were on the clock or being paid by the hour, how many things they think to go off and look at on your behalf for you. Actually, sometimes I've had a deal where we were renting premises and my solicitor wanted to go off and look at leases and all the background about that property. And said, well, we're not buying that. We're just going to continue to lease it through the same business. And that was an example where they wanted to go up and do all of these searches. We said, no, it's not necessary. Let's just focus on the deal itself. Well, that's why we have the fixed fee arrangement in order to keep those costs minimized.
But that works because you deal with multiple acquisitions and they're attracted to deal with you that way, right? For somebody who sells the business just once, they might not get that fixed deal, or they still can negotiate a fixed deal.
They could potentially negotiate a fixed deal, but it may be slightly higher than what I pay, for example, only because I'm able to prepare a lot of those documents myself. We can support somebody with it if they come to us. But quite often, I'm lucky in respect of I've worked with the same solicitors for a while. They're a good team of people. They know how I work and I know how they work. So the relationship is very, very good. But for anybody going into it the first time, I would always encourage them to try, as a first point of call, try to get their solicitor on a fixed fee arrangement.
I see. You probably would do the same with the quality of earnings?
Yes. Yeah. We do that more so with our clients in the United States than not so much in the UK, but certainly clients in the United States.
And you do it yourself because you're in accounting, you have multiple
That's
accounting
it.
firms. Yeah, I see.
Yeah.
Let's say it's beyond that million. Let's say, I don't know, it's 10 million. So yes, you got the relief on the first million. You cut down on some of the expenses with the legal and accounting. What other strategies or things that you can look at to cut down on that capital gain?
Depending on the country and the size of the deal, there may be tax incentives available. In the UK, we've got business asset disposal relief. Thereafter, you're going to be paying a lot more tax. But if I was in a situation where we were looking at a deal of that size, I would always bring in a tax specialist to support me with that. My background is accountancy, but I don't necessarily specialize in tax. So that's where I reach out to the people who I know who've got that specialist knowledge. And there are other deal structures in the United States. There's something that I'm aware of called an annuity deal, where that can be a lot more tax efficient, where the whole consideration for the deal may be spread over 10 years. And it gives the sellers a regular monthly income for 10 years. And it could be more tax efficient that way. So it really depends on the country where the deal is happening, I would guess.
Would that something also probably had to be entertained, again, keeping the end in mind, get the tax strategies before going into full-blown scale to hit your numbers and prepare the business and make it sell ready? Probably would be a great idea to already structure it from the get-go the proper way versus like when it's actually time to sell.
Yeah, and that's all that part of that preparation process, having those discussions with somebody who can help them put the structure in place in the business itself, but also have that tax both from a business perspective and from a personal perspective to make sure that the sellers are getting the right advice in advance of any exit, because they can start to build that relationship with the tax specialist. And as the tax regimes change and the tax laws change, that person will keep the seller fully informed.
Got it. Thank you for sharing that. That's pretty cool. Now, I know we can dwell more and more on that subject. I know we're coming towards the end. Anything I didn't ask you that you want to mention to our audience?
The one thing that we do, if anybody out there has aspirations to acquire businesses, we can certainly support them. There are groups out there as well. If they want to go and learn everything thoroughly, if they want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, I can point them in the right direction for that. If people are looking at deals where finance isn't there, it doesn't come naturally to them, we provide a service where we will financially analyze deals for people. We can support with due diligence. So we've got a whole range of support services that we can help people with. What I would always say is, when you're looking to acquire a business, surround yourself with the expertise that you need. So if you don't have the financial knowledge, go and find an accountant with M&A expertise and experience. If you don't have the legal knowledge, go and find yourself a good legal support person. So whatever that happens to be, go and find it. What's the saying? If you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. So I was always trying to make sure I've got smarter people around me, because I can't know everything. So I think that's the key piece of advice I would offer to everybody watching.
Awesome. Thank you. So how one would find you, I will include the link in the description. I'll have my team
So-
do that. LinkedIn. And
Yep. So that people can find me on LinkedIn. I've got a personal website, which is steverooms.com. So people can reach out to me there. Email steve@steverooms.com. So any one of those ways, if people reach out, we can book some time in the diary and I can help them. We can have an initial chat as to what it is people are trying to achieve. And if we can support them, we'll explain how we can support them.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you, Steve, for all the insights. My mind is racing, so many ideas. It's always inspiring to hear other entrepreneurs share their journey and how they do things. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you.